Geez, Lynn, it's about time we got together here.
Well, I mean, you're in L.A. all the time, but you're opening, your show's opening and previews tomorrow.
Yeah, and then Monday is the official opening, according to theater lore.
To theater, and it's at what theater?
At Theater 4 at between 9th and 10th on 55th Street.
Okay, what time are the shows? Let's get all this.
8 o'clock, 3 o'clock matinees, except for Wednesday, which are 2 o'clock. And we'll see if anybody comes. It's always problematic, you know.
Well, you're doing a circuit. I mean, you did Bob, you did Lenny Lopate. You're here. Where else have you been? Did I miss you?
When is Mayor Giuliani going to take a flamethrower and go through WNYC?
He already did. He gave them Curtis Sliwa, which
I see that. I'd rather have been with Curtis Sliwa. You know, if I didn't have a choice.
Really?
Yes, the home office of liberalism. Don't you know there's some things that shouldn't be joked about, said Lenny? I've never heard that before, you know, in America.
Yeah, he did say that.
Yeah.
But they had the most serious calls. It was so fun.
Yeah,
I mean,
they acted like I was the public defender. Nobody talked about humor. Didn't you love that, the way they talk about, and there shouldn't be any investigations? And I like the woman that said she was disturbed by me. That's good. She needs to be disturbed. I got the feeling that station has a bunch of listeners who stay in bed in Staten Island and read the Sunday Times all week till the next one comes out. They never go to the theater.
I wanted to mention something that you said on that about, because I agree with you. I've never been out of New York because I won't fly, so I don't go anywhere. But New York and L.A., from what I've heard, are not America. They're nothing like them.
Not.
However, are you from New York?
No.
You're not. But have you been, there's Queens, which is America. I think the other boroughs here are America, and like Manhattan isn't America.
I wrote a book about this in 1976 entitled Heartland, in which I said the hope of America was between the two cities. But those people that go to see Woody Allen in Westwood are on 3rd Avenue. No, they don't go anymore. They hate him. They found them guilty. And did you notice all those liberals that called me today who love mankind, how riddled with hate they were? But when they drummed Woody out of the core without a trial.
Well, I certainly did. I'm a liberal. You're going to hate me by the time you leave.
Well, the guy I talked to this morning wasn't a liberal.
But
he's a right-wing social democrat.
What is a right-wing social democrat? See,
social democrats are what a false position for people who don't want to stay with the left because they'll get killed and don't want to go to the right because it takes too much discipline. So they sit on the fence. And they talk because they don't want you to find out that they're cowards. They say that they're prudent, and they talk about the side of the angels. Women should have rights, and more Eskimos should be anchor men, and what are we doing to aid Albanian free trade? It's all about how wonderful they are. But they wouldn't have to make themselves feel wonderful for 10 minutes if they didn't feel bad all the time. And they feel bad all the time because they're the same people that turned into Hollywood writers. They're very guilty people who went south. They left Jack Kennedy in the street. They left Gene McCarthy at the Chicago Convention. They're ridden with guilt. The fascists are the same people they were at the beginning of the movie. They didn't change. They're proud of everything they've stolen. No, Middle America's it, Lynn.
No, but Middle America is in Queens. Believe me, if you went to Elmhurst, if you went to Staten Island and parts of Brooklyn, that's America. You should go. You're going to be in New York. You should, go to the boroughs.
Well, maybe I'll be in New York. We'll see how business is.
Well, oh, please. My listeners alone should keep you for years here.
I'm modest, too. So, you know.
Now, you said, you know what's so fascinating about you? I figured it out listening to you. I'll tell you what's so fascinating. That you can't label you.
Good.
You can't put a label on you because for years I said, oh, my God, he used to be a liberal. He's a right-wing maniac now. And yet somebody mentioned the October surprise.
Yeah.
And you said, you know.
How did you like the way Lopate said nothing came of that? Nothing came of it? Nothing. No, maybe the listener said that, but he didn't contest it. A great deal, of course, is coming. You might be interested in this. John Peters owns Gary Sick's book, The October Surprise, and asked me to adapt the screenplay.
Really?
Yeah. And Bob Town helped me to put the script together, which nobody at Peters' office understood anyway. They're liberals, too. They're friends of the earth. But not enough so that Barbara can't cross the picket line in Vegas.
Now, what is that? What picket? She crossed what
Culinary
picket
Workers
line?
Union.
Well, I also find it amazing that if she's so much for the people, how many people have $350 for a ticket? You know, couldn't she set
That's what Bob
aside
Grant
like
said the
some?
other day.
Well, I agree with him sometimes, but I mean, you know, couldn't there be a few $10 tickets there for the people?
That's like the old joke, you know, where the guy said, I agree, even sometimes I agree with Barry Goldwater. We're both ashamed of his being Jewish. So,
yeah, well, Barry Goldwater stuck up for Bill Clinton the other day.
Well, it's easy. It costs nothing. It's like when Gorbachev and his wife went to the Cuban school and they said to the students, God bless you. It's easy for them to say.
That's true. Yeah, Bob went on a whole rampage about now how Goldwater's like totally senile.
This is all obfuscation with the liberals. It's all obfuscation to make you think that they're wonderful. It's like I sit with a movie producer and he says, you know, Mort, I know you're somewhat resentful of the money I cheated you on when you wrote the script, but I want you to know I'm giving it to a fresh air fund for Filipino children. See, it makes me feel better.
No, it doesn't.
That's what Social Democrats do. They keep telling you how wonderful they are. Also, they believe in a world where nothing is anybody's fault.
Yeah, well, that's getting on my nerves.
Me too.
As a matter of fact.
They made a world in which no one can live. For instance, you remember when I hit this guy this morning with the fact that Reardon and Giuliani were no surprise? He let that go right by. The manager of Mike Wu's campaign, the Chinese liberal candidate in California, says to me, we underestimated the white fear of crime in the suburbs. I said, you ignored it. You didn't underestimate it. You ridiculed it and ignored it, and that's what they do. They stood around here and said, well, nobody will vote for a Republican. Jerry Brown lost to Pete Wilson in the Senate because he said, they've got to accept me. What are they going to do? Well, you saw what they did.
Yeah, but they're all the same now. I mean, you said, I felt so great because I've been saying for months, just to prove I don't like Clinton, when NAFTA was going on, I kept saying, a new Democrat. You know what a new Democrat is? He's a Republican.
Good girl.
You
That's
know,
exactly
I mean, how could he have done this? George Bush starts this stupid NAFTA thing, and Mr. New Democrat comes in?
Trilateral Commission. It's the same guys. He's got the Good Housekeeping seal. You notice Barbara Walters. Did you see her Friday, 2020?
No, I was working.
She loves immigrants. You know, she believes in the immigrant dream. So she took a typical immigrant, Henry Kissinger, back to his hometown in Germany. And she said, this man has had a lasting legacy, even though there's a Democrat in now, Clinton. His head of his national security advisor, Anthony Lake, is an alumnus of Kissinger. Why would Clinton want an alumnus of Kissinger? But she didn't ask that, Barbara.
Same.
Yeah.
But I have this theory. I mean, this is crazy. I believe that they get to be president and somebody takes them in a room and whispers things to them that changes how they look at. I mean, there are things, I never believed this about the Vietnam War when people say, well, Nixon knows things we don't know. But I believe they tell them something, you know, probably along the lines of, remember Jack Kennedy. Yes. You know, you're not going to go against us.
If they have to be reminded.
And they all, well, I think Clinton had to be reminded.
I think that what you do is, it's a bad script. The Vietnamese War was a bad play. Nobody was going to go. So they went to the theatrical page of the Times and they said, we're firing the leading man, but we're keeping the script. We're not going to the hotel and fixing the second act. And they brought in, the same thing with when you're saying Jack Kennedy. When I was working for Jim Garrison in New Orleans, I'm in a bar in the French Quarter called Moran's, and a guy comes up to me in the New York Times, who shall be nameless, and he says to me, you're that paranoid guy that says we're in a conspiracy to protect the federal government. Do you think that we all take orders in a large room? And I said, no, and we had about 5 drinks together, as he's on an expense account. And he said to me, nobody tells me what to write. I said, good. And he said, yeah, you say that to me in the bar, but why don't you say that on national television and clear our name at the Times? And later on, as he got good and drunk, he said to me, of course, nobody has to tell me. I know pretty much what to hand in. Thank you and good night.
Yeah, well, that's it. Exactly it.
Good girl. You're on the money.
I have a new conspiracy theory, though.
What happened?
Okay, this is my new conspiracy theory. The day after Ronald Reagan came out against Oliver North and said North had lied about him, it was a story this big in the paper.
Yes.
That Oliver North's private plane crashed a half an hour after he got off it with a pilot that North says knew every airport in Virginia and Washington and everything, that the guy could have landed, blindfolded.
Sure.
The plane crashed and killed the pilot. And I am convinced that because of the people North hung out with, that now everybody hates him, that plane was sabotaged and that they missed, that North wasn't on it. I am convinced that that's what happened.
The question is, how many more will have to die before our friends, our mutual friends in some cases, will be convinced that murder is very much a part of the system now. Did you notice Helen Thomas, our senior White House correspondent? She said recently that there are death squads in the Pentagon and at the State Department. She said it openly. And nobody will take her on. And nobody will question her integrity either.
Well, you're not going to like this as I say it before a commercial, but she's a woman, so nobody will take her seriously
think so?
either. I really do think so. I'm LYNN Samuels. Mort Sahl is my guest. I'll open up the phones in a while. I've been waiting since about 1958 to talk to him, so I'm not going to share him so fast.
I miss it a great deal, but I think people are tired of me complaining. In fact, yesterday I drove to Connecticut on Sunday to see if there's a place I could live up there and put a dish in the yard. That's why I went up there. And I just kept running into writers in old bookstores who should be down here standing shoulder to shoulder with us and fighting. Instead of that, they're standing up there.
But now, why is there is no political humor anymore? When you started, or when I remember, I don't know when you started, when I remember you, there was a lot of political humor. And now there's just insulting women, saying the F word every 4 seconds.
Right.
Why is there no political humor?
Well, the kids are very political, and they've been co-opted by the materialism. See, the idea is Reagan and Bush are gone. There's no materialism. It should be that simple. They all want to sell in. They're all in line to sell in. I saw a couple of rap kids on MTV the other day, and they said, "We're making money. That's the American dream, isn't it?" Which no one contested. I mean, what have you got there? When George Carlin, who knows better, stands on this show, he stands up and says, "Golf is a racist game." You know, I hate to bother the liberals again, but, white guys did settle the country. They really did. And when the time came at night to get off the covered wagon, there was no McDonald's at the Holiday Inn. They helped each other. They loved their wives, and they honored their commitments, and they were white European males. According to this movie I was in the other night, anybody who's straight and Gentile and male is automatically your enemy. I doubt if it's that simple.
The Showtime.
Yeah. The movie was full of a lot of... But you know what it is? It's bourgeois rage. It's from comedy clubs. It's like saying, you hate your parents, don't you? I hate mine, too. It doesn't have anything to do with social conflict.
And it has to do with old television shows. And you used to say Brooklyn, and everybody laughed.
Yeah, right.
And now you say the Brady Bunch. Yeah. And people fall off their chairs.
Well, to go into a comedy club and have a kid there who was reared on television tell you ostensibly what life is about. They don't know what life is about. They've never been to a university. They've never lived with a woman. They've never made a commitment to a woman. They've never been in the army. They don't know anything about America. So they send hate letters home.
It's what life is now.
Pardon me?
It's what life is about now. Life is not about what it used to be about.
Pauline
it's about
Kael,
what it's about now.
She called it hate letters to America, what those kids were saying. She's good, wasn't she? I say that past tense because she isn't writing.
Yes.
But she's great.
Yes.
That's the top hand.
Although I always knew if she loved a movie, I would hate it. And if she was like my favorite critic, because you just need to find someone you always agree with or always disagree with.
Well, that's true. I disagreed with her about a lot of it, too, especially Peckinpah, who was a great friend of mine. And an American.
Did she like him? I don't even remember. I loved Peckinpah.
She liked him sometimes, but a lot of times she didn't. She thought he was a fascist.
Straw Dogs. I loved Straw Dogs.
I was around through that.
And I remember all the commotion because they said, look at that. He wouldn't kill those guys. I remember this on a Barry Gray show. He wouldn't kill those guys when they raped his wife. But when they tried to get into his house, he stood up for the honor of his property and not of his wife.
This afternoon, Lynn, Peckinpah's first movie, Ride the High Country, was on with Randolph Scott and Joel McRae. And McRae, who's had almost everything taken from him, is in his senior years. They asked him what he wants. He says, I want to walk into my own house undiminished. Sam had a real dream about America, And like all those guys, he was reticent to express himself, but he loved and honored women. Example, remember Red River?
Only vaguely.
John Wayne.
Only vaguely.
Before, when they're camped at night, Harry Carey, who's riding the picket, says to John Wayne, who's leading the drive, when the drive is over, I'll have $100. My wife and I can buy our own farm. And when I get to Abilene, I'd like to buy her a pair of those red shoes she fancies. Then there's a stampede and he's killed. And Wayne says to Montgomery Clift, his son, he says, see, he's paid as if he completed the drive and give his widow anything he needs. And Cliff smirks and he says, maybe a beautiful pair of red shoes? And Wayne turns in fury and he says, that's what she wanted, isn't it? He doesn't want any emotional displays, but he's an honorable man. And for those of you out there who think John Wayne couldn't act, he made you believe that Montgomery Clift could beat him up.
That's entertainment.
Yeah.
That's acting. I was actually, now this is funny because of the way you, see, but there was another history. This is, you're not, into this women's lib thing, and I, being a woman, I suppose, am sort of.
Tell me.
But there was another history. You don't know that these men who together, said all these things, didn't go home and beat their wives, or force them to have sex. I mean, you don't know. There's
They kept the dream alive in us out front. They invented Jean Arthur.
See, but you want what I want. Like, you want what they told us, but that behind closed doors was never really true.
Yeah, but you know what Freud said? A patient said to him, I've never been married, he said, but I long, and I can see in my mind's eye, Christmas with the family, and I long for that closeness. How can I be nostalgic for something I've never experienced? And Freud said, that's the stuff that dreams are made of. You see, they kept that thing alive. The other night I saw Chain Lightning with Bogey, and he tries out an ejection pod, which is sure death, and he's safe. And Eleanor Parker says, why did you do it? And he says, it was the quickest way to get down here where you are. Oh yeah, right. Your heart beats a little bit faster. Steve McQueen and Natalie Wood, Love with the Proper Stranger.
Oh, that's one of my favorite movies in the whole...
boy.
But was it ever like... I understand what you mean, but it was never like... You see, that's why all this happened. Because it wasn't like this. Because these men went home and smacked the women around. Because the black people, couldn't ride in the buses. And, the reality took over.
But what they did was become brutal and try to alternate the role of oppressor rather than eliminate it. That's the problem. The problem is getting even. I don't want anybody to be equal to me. I want them to be equal to the task. That's the problem that America's suffering from, and there's no dream of romance and justice. Even if you're right, it probably never was like that. I think you're quite right. But they dreamed positively, and we aspired to a dream of romance, even if we couldn't refine it, or in many cases, we haven't realized it. Many of us haven't, unfortunately.
All right, I'll buy that.
But to see One-Eyed Jacks on AMC the other night.
Yeah.
I was there when Brando made that. I was there through the whole thing. In fact, I entertained at the cast party. You remember when Pina says to him, our baby will come in the spring, and he'll be something wonderful because he's our love. I didn't see, and the liberals in the room with me didn't make fun of it either. It was totally compelling. And Marlon's entire speech in there, when they tell him he's finished, he says, you're all forgetting something, aren't you? I'm not dead yet. That's really a great movie. By the way, the screenplay was by Calder Willingham and Guy Trosper, two of the finest writers in American history.
Well, they were writers then also. You've worked on screenplays. I never knew that.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
But you're the one that you said earlier that they call you up in the middle of the night to fix stuff?
Yeah, sometimes. I worked for some very unlikely people. Eventually, everything you write does get done, even if it's appropriated. But I write very, very romantic movies. I wrote a movie for Irwin Winkler called The Last Anchor Man. And in the movie, which was at that time with Peck and Meryl Streep, he's like Murrow, and she's his protege. And she's like all about even in the newsroom. She's a killer. But in the end, after winning and becoming Diane Sawyer, she suffers from hysterical paralysis, as her mother did, and can't walk to the studio to get her ill-gotten gains. And her boyfriend comes by. And she asks him, for mercy. And he looks at her. He says, well, there's only really one question. She says, I can't walk. He says, well, do you want to live? Do you want to die? If you want to die, I'll leave you there because I want to help you walk. And love redeems her. What trouble do you think I had with selling that movie? All the intellectuals, the liberals all said to me, well, do you really think love conquers all?
Yeah.
I had everybody in the newsroom get up when Murrow's fired and walk out en masse. They didn't want to do it. They don't believe in that. There's certain people that'll do things and certain people won't. The first movie I ever worked for, I wrote for Eastwood. And in that movie, he's broke. And I went to college with him. We're old friends. And he works into the marina in Los Angeles. And there's a guy that looks like Buddha there, a movie producer, with all kinds of young things on his yacht. the helicopter in the aft end. And he always has great girls there. And he comes up behind Eastwood at the signal and honks at him with these Maserati air horns to get out of the way. And Eastwood has got a broken marriage. And he goes home and his wife throws him out. And a dog runs after his truck and he stops and stares the dog down and says, "Be careful, you might just get what you're chasing." And he doesn't know what to do. He's got an embittered wife at home and a crazy airheaded stewardess at his place. And this guy's honking at him at the same time. So he goes up and he opens the hood of the Maserati and tears out all the wiring and walks over to the guy and says, "Think of it as a vasectomy." So, that's the kind of stuff I wrote. I wrote about the realization of the dream, and I couldn't stop my hand, literally, from writing that love conquers all. And I have no reason to believe it. You could take the writers and put them in Madison Square Garden and have a trial. They've misled the public. They're worse than Goebbels in Germany. They taught us all this.
Okay, we have to take a break. Steve Malzberg.
Yes, LYNN Samuels.
Give us the sports. I want to get back to Mort Sahl and get rid of you.
I know. No
okay.
Around the country.
And he's probably doing his own radio show now.
I hope so.
What do you do when you're not in New York doing the show?
Well, when I'm in L.A., I drive around in a sports car, and I think, because I decided, Freud said, Lynn, you're right, that it's easy to say what you think. For all those people who talk about free speech, it's harder to know what you think. So I figured at my age, it'd be unattractive if I didn't know what I thought. So I drive around and I try to refine my thinking. But what I do is I drive to precincts of Middle America, like in Los Angeles, it's a place called Palmdale. And I go up to Palmdale and I go in the Walmart bakery. And I have muffin and coffee, and I talk to off-duty policemen, people who work for a living, usually Perot people, generally. And I talk to them about America. And I do that, and I watch the satellite. Since I got divorced, I'm not as ruled by my hormones. The thing with the women has been funny. I'll give you a great example. The last time I went out was in August. That's the last date I had. I meet this analyst, and she says to me, in Beverly Hills, it's impossible not to meet one. I'm in a coffee house, and her daughter runs it, and the grandmother helps. And the grandmother is very maternal to me. She gives me toast in the morning, stuff that isn't on the menu. And she said, "Do you come here often?" says the analyst. And I said, "Well, your mother takes great care of me." And the analyst said, "It's easy for you to say that. She's not your mother. That's an analyst."
Oh,
at $200 an hour. And the other one was great. Is I was on a date, and in Los Angeles, and this lady who's still mad at her first husband says to me, "Do you play golf?" I said, "No." "Do you play tennis?" I said, "No." "What do you do?" I said, "Well, I drive around in my NSX and think." She said, "Well, where do you drive?" I said, "I drive to Palmdale." She said, "What on earth is up there?" That means people live there. She said, I said, "Well, there are people up there." And she said, "What are you trying to say about them?" I said, "I guess I'm saying that they're human." And she said, "Well, that's easy for them. They don't live under the stress we do in Beverly Hills." Isn't that perfect?
You know where you would get, why don't you date some of the women in Palmdale?
That didn't occur to me. I'm not very predatory anymore.
No, but I said to somebody this afternoon that when you did that week of the 10 o'clock shows, I said he hates women, or has been so, screwed over by women.
I was married to a fantastic girl, and I liked it, and every minute of it, mostly.
And she didn't.
Yeah, obviously, but yet. What do they think is loving women? First of all, listening to them is the ultimate compliment. Not many guys do that anyway.
No, they sure don't.
Yeah. But, this nonsense here, when you come back here, New York, the home office of liberalism, everybody gives you a lecture about feminism, and then when your back is turned, they try and jump on your mother. These guys are unbelievable. I mean, it's such hypocrisy. Jack Kennedy said to me, Barbara Tuchman is my favorite writer. He didn't say she's my favorite lady writer. She's his favorite writer. All of that that's all eyewash. All of this is feeble excuses for people's failure. I wasn't given a break. How many men did Gloria Steinem exploit in order to become prominent? And didn't she play the oldest game women play? A game that she decries? Come on. It's absurd.
Well, that's what you need. You need one of these normal. I have a friend who had a lawyer who who had this very beautiful girl that he kept running around with. And I said, oh, is he married to her? And my friend said, no, he used to have a regular wife.
A regular wife?
You know, which means, like, you should date one of those women in one of those regular places. So
well, I'll tell you something. You know, it's funny. The people in L.A. and New York make fun of those people, but they honor their commitments.
But they're the real people.
Yes.
I mean, even I know that. I'm a person in New York.
They're American. They're American.
And I don't necessarily want to hang out with those people, but I recognize that those are the real people. We're not the real people.
They're not bad to hang out with. Ross Perot's a great friend of mine. He's a middle American.
Oh, please. I think Ross Perot is a psychotic.
Oh, come on.
You know, he wants to be a dictator. He scares me.
Not me. He doesn't scare me.
You don't scare as easy as I do.
He's, do you hear what he said about guns? They asked him about gun control. He said, when I was a boy, he said, I had a gun, I just didn't take it to school. You know what they can't stand about him? It's what I said this morning. He bought into capitalism and monogamy and being an upright American, and they can't stand it. When you don't approach it like a shuck and you believe it, they can't take it.
Now, wait it. You know how he made all his first money?
Yeah.
By doing the Medicare and Medicaid work for the government and charging the government more money than he charged. So he ripped off the government to make a fortune.
I don't think he ripped them off.
He charged them more than anybody else.
Do we know that? Do we really know that?
It was in.
What? In what?
You know what I'm going to say. Where was it, Mort?
Don't say the New York Times.
Yes!
I can't stand it. Well, we got through 40 minutes without mentioning the Times. That's a record.
I hate the New York Times, but it was in the New York Times.
My favorite story in the New York Times is when Garrison arrested a man named Clay Shaw, charged him with murdering President Kennedy, and the New York Times said, this is roughly the quote, they said, yesterday in a Midtown hotel over an appetizing buffet of salted peanuts and hot tamales, Clay Shaw was charming and met the press. Like your average conspirator. I don't know why we arrested him. We'd read the Times, we wouldn't have arrested him.
Well, that's like what I said. I don't know if you heard the last caller David Frost interviewed Zhirinovsky on Channel 13. And it occurred to me that if we had had television, people would have been sitting and saying, well, now, look, Mr. Stalin, you know, or Adolf, you know, what are you going to do about the Jews in Germany?
The people in the media would have genuflected first.
Yes.
Saturday Night Live would have had him on to show he's a good sport.
Exactly, because everybody's equal. You know, it's like Hitler. You would have had to have talked to Hitler because he had to be fair.
Very good point. You know, it's interesting. But you know, if you read the New York Times, you would think that Jim Garrison was insane or, at a minimum, interested in self-aggrandizement. Let me tell you two things about him. When I arrived in New Orleans, you don't read this in the Times. Some Southern fundamentalists, it's only 1965 now, got after two gay kids that ran the Doubleday bookstore, and they grabbed them for having a Jimmy Baldwin book in the window and being obscene. And they gave the DA, they gave Garrison that to prosecute. And he called the two kids and he said, can you come to my house for dinner tonight? And they did. And he said, you got to fight me on this, and I'll show you how you can beat me in court. And they said, well, we're not going to do that. That's too much trouble. We'll just pay the fine and reopen. And he said, I won't let you do that. And they said, why? And he said, because next time they'll burn your books. That's who he was. Most patriotic man I ever met. He also said this to me. At the height of this investigation, I rewrote, I actually engineered his re-election campaign for $12,000, all the commercials. And we were coming out of the studio at ABC in New Orleans, and we had to go single file because of the cramped quarters. And the girl who's become my wife was in front of me, and Garrison was back of me, and he grabbed my arm. He's 6'7". He was 6'7". He said to me, you better marry that girl. So I was embarrassed, see. So I said, hey, listen, I don't mind your arresting these people and talking about Kennedy's death, but stay out of my life, will you? And he said, I'm not joking. You better marry that girl. And I said, what do you want from me? And he said to me, do you believe in what we're doing? And I said, yes. And he said, well, nothing any of us do is worth anything if there's no love in our lives. Jim Garrison. I haven't heard that from George Bush or Bill Clinton.
Well, there's so many girls he could say that about.
Yeah, and
Bill Clinton.
That's the other hypocrisy. Remember the Gary Hart thing? The liberals in Hollywood, Beatty, Newman, all those guys. But it's a terrible thing. He's got a girl. So thank God, I'm glad you told me. I almost voted for him. We don't want a guy like that leading our party. They have no humor about this self-righteousness. You know,
Well, nobody has any humor anymore about anything.
You noticed. Yeah. Especially the comedians.
Well, you can't make fun of anybody. Everybody's like a protected minority group. You can't make fun of anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all very grim, isn't it?
Yes.
But interestingly enough, if you want to make fun of the great unwashed, if you want to do a sketch on Saturday Night Live and make fun of people who live in Ohio, you can make an indictment of normal people. That's okay, because they haven't got a lobby. And who's making the indictment? A bunch of suburban kids from Long Island.
Who've risen above it and now work in the media in New York.
Yeah, hot dog.
That make us better. All right, who killed Kennedy? I'm LYNN Samuels, by the way. This is Mort Sahl. I feel like I'm on BAI, where you never reintroduce anybody, you know,
Pacifica?
for 800 years. I worked there. I worked there for 10 years before I came here.
You know the station in L.A., KPFK?
Never having been there, no, but their reputation precedes them. Oh, they might. Do they love you, or do they hate you, or don't they know?
Not especially. They play a lot of my stuff, but I brought a gun. It's the government guy.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't know who it is in New York, but...
The agent provocateur, Lynn.
But there are no agents provocateurs.
Of course not.
Are there?
No, and the government doesn't clear anything that goes on network news.
Where is my cousin, Mark Lane?
Is he your cousin?
Yes.
Hey, I learned something.
But I only ever met him when I went to BAI and started interviewing him. I had never met him or anything.
One thing he didn't get was the credit from Oliver Stone, because he opened the door 27 years before. He's like a razor. There's no debater like Mark. He's also a very cold guy to know. I always got the feeling that if Dracula tried to drive a stake through Mark Lane's heart, it would be blunt on one end. But he's brilliant. I take nothing away. He did a lot of great work.
Did the stuff you did with Garrison, I mean, you really became obsessed, much more so than most people. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but did it ruin your career in some way?
It might have slowed me up. Only the people that tried to penalize me would know that. But I'll tell you, it was the finest hour in my life. I really became a man. The act I have now, I didn't have when I went down there. You know, Nietzsche says anything that doesn't kill you will make you stronger. First of all, I was with middle Americans. I was with patriots that love this country. And we were doing the right thing. In other words, when fascism tried to unravel America, I fought it. I, didn't hold a dinner dance at the Beverly Hilton to raise money to save the Redwoods. I was there. And we sent 4 guys to jail. We did some really important work, and we planted forever the doubt. When I went to New Orleans, 85% of the American people thought Oswald did it. And when we left New Orleans, losing the case, I acknowledge, 85% of the American people believed it was a conspiracy. We did the right thing. And the people that are haunted are people like Senator Kennedy, who didn't do the right thing. I'm not haunted.
He couldn't.
Probably.
I mean, obviously, he saw Jack and Bobby, and he knew he was next.
Listen, I say it through clenched teeth, because if the Democrats had the integrity, they would have nominated him. By the way, parenthetically, they say they care about women's rights. They say they care about child labor. They say they care about minorities. Who's had more fidelity to those causes than Ted Kennedy? Do they nominate him? They nominate Mondale, Dukakis, and Clinton, which shows you what their commitment is. He's a hostage. They went along with the joke, was the discreditation of him. Interesting, huh?
That's true.
Yeah?
And a great time to take a break. Keep calling, because he can stay. So I'm going to keep him until the end of this hour, and you can have Mort Sahl after the end of the hour, okay? This is the nastiest thing I've ever done to this audience, is not let them call up for a whole hour.
When they nominate all those guys that turn tail, his speech, they claim they like women and that I'm a chauvinist. That speech after Anita Hill, what did they say? That's a great speech. And they didn't say a word. Did you notice today with Lenny, by the way, he had another sin when the guy called up about how wonderful Clarence Thomas was? He didn't take him to task at all?
No, you don't understand something about public radio, I think. The hosts are not supposed to be opinionated.
Well, he must be very comfortable there.
Appear, whatever they really think they're supposed to be.
What about the listeners? There wasn't one bit of variance in that.
No, I was really well, wait, we haven't taken any calls yet, so I don't know what my listeners...
Jewish and safe.
I don't know what my listeners are going to be like.
We're in a country now where the women are all angry and the men are all frightened. They're all like cream of wheat. You know, when you said at the beginning, an important point, you said about, when a guy says he's enlightened, he's a feminist, that means You keep working till you drop dead. Don't have any children. He won't take care of you if you're between jobs. Don't ask to borrow his car, and he's liberating you.
Well, I also think it's a way to have sex.
Alan Alda.
When they say, "Oh, I'm a feminist," I think that's like a pickup line.
We ought to talk about sex, what it's become.
Yeah, well, were you the one who said once on one of those? Somebody said, "How do you think about sex?" And the answer was nostalgically. Was that you?
No.
It's a line I've been quoting. I can't remember who said it, but that's how I think about it.
Sex is terrific if memory serves. That's what it was, yeah.
Oh, all right, then that was you. Then I've been misquoting you all these years.
It's now
well, if you haven't had a date since August,
it's now become
we have nothing to talk about.
Impersonal thing going, thanks to the movies. Thanks to the movies. Everybody's like a laboratory rat. Incredible.
Well, not if you pick the right person. You just have to find, like, the person that you're madly, insanely in love with who loves you. And otherwise don't have sex.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, now I've straightened your whole life out.
Now I'm ready.
I mean, that's it. I mean, everybody, when you're young,
yes,
you'll jump into bed with anybody.
Well, there was a time, yeah. But it's become a distraction to keep you from asking anything personal.
No, but then there's a point in your life where you realize that it's not worth it, so you just don't do it unless it's with somebody you really care about.
Who do you talk to here?
Who do I talk to?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
There isn't anybody to talk to, is there?
Yes, there is.
I mean, everybody's programmed. They're all like reruns.
Oh, you mean in general?
Yeah, social democrats.
I'll tell you something. I sit home on my couch, and I don't talk to much of anybody in real life.
That's okay. That's a luxury.
Isn't it great to have a job where they pay you to sit and read the papers all day and then come and talk at night?
You can bring it off. It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
I'm like a hermit anyway. I don't like people.
That's why the satellite is good. 300 channels.
Oh, I would love to. And you see all the raw news feeds coming into the networks
and the movies from all channels the cable company won't carry, and 4 feeds from PBS. You get some great stuff.
Now, what do the cable companies think? I mean, you're getting like HBO and everything for free.
You pay them.
Oh, you do? Oh,
I broke through for 8 years, and they finally caught me.
Oh, what, they zapped you?
I was like a hacker.
Then we got Mort Sahl.
They got us. But that's all right. What they do is they charge you more than if you went through cable. But you can get a lot of things. You can get a lot of companies they won't carry. Time Warner doesn't want to carry anything cultural because it won't be mass, they won't make a lot of money.
But as somebody pointed out to me, there's no TV guide for this. So what?
Yes, there is.
Oh, there is.
It's called Satellite TV Week, and it's published in Fortuna, California, and there's another one out of Shelby, North Carolina.
It must be like 800 pages
and it's very accurate. It's great.
Oh.
And then you get very adept at it. You can find things that slip through. You get feeds, too. See, at night, they send things across the country to bank. The movies of the week for next month come through at night. You can't sleep.
So so you watch television
a lot,
day and night?
Yeah, well, it's better than getting into trouble.
But do you feel is that corrupting you?
Not yet.
We love to say, everybody likes to say how bad mass culture is.
Yeah.
And yet I sit there saying, well, I'm going to watch Beavis and Butthead to see what the kids are listening to, so why aren't I corrupted? Why
because you have a strong foundation. And you play it against that, and it recedes.
How do we go back?
To?
You and I are both talking about, well, nobody has any education, there's no love, there's no romance, nothing is the way it used to be. But you can't take society or history, you can't go back. So
you don't have to go back. That's a mistake. What they did is they sold out America. They don't really love the country. That's what it's about. It's really about patriotism. They don't love America. America is what has to be loved. And it's like that speech. America's the girl. America's the girl.
But how do we get to that?
Well, the first thing you got to do is protect your state of mind. You can't let all this crap that's coming all day long. Look at them here with their one newspaper. One paper. Hawking away. And in Washington, it's the Post.
Well, we actually have 4 papers, but nobody...
Yeah, I read the Post, if you can call it the paper. I know.
They have the best horoscope I ever read in my whole life. That guy, Patrick Walker, is a mind blower. Are you into that?
To that, isn't there? Nancy Reagan notwithstanding.
No, I really think there is something to it. But we have like 2.5, she died, and I'll tell you who I felt really sorry when she died was Pat Nixon, because she loved him. Whatever I thought he was, that woman...
You see him crying at the funeral? That's the question of these world leaders. You know, when Ho Chi Minh died, you remember the people in the street? Who do you think is going to cry when Clinton dies? It's unbelievable. Talk about an empty suit.
But he's better than Bush. I mean, I know we're all sick of going, he's better than...
That's what they kept telling you. Are you sure?
Yes. Yes, I am absolutely positive he's better than Bush. Because if there was any little corruption, he did it himself. He didn't have, like, sons running around looting the SNLs. He at least had the guts to loot that SNL all by himself with his wife. That's togetherness, Mort.
Are they together?
Well, they were in whatever that... Oh, I don't think they sleep together. I think there's a deal. I'll go on 60 Minutes and pretend that I don't care you were screwing around, but you're never going to bed with me again.
Do you remember when President Reagan said that the most important thing to Nancy is that the girl be at the door when you come back from the wars every day? She said Clark Gable had said it to her. There's that thing, you open the door and your girl is there. The liberals went into cardiac arrest. They couldn't stand it. Not only that she loves them, but that anybody loves anybody. It's almost a threat to everything they believe in. You know, it's like going to somebody's 40th anniversary celebration. You know, it's a threat to everything you believe in. The Phil Donahue Show and psychoanalysis and general unhappiness.
Well, now you go to the 40th anniversary and your father says, I've been wearing your mother's clothes for the last 40 years.
Well, I went to one recently, you know, my boss at the Monitor channel. But, you know, I worked for the Christian Science Monitor for 3 years, which the liberals also could not stand. Best place I ever worked in my life. Total freedom. Total freedom. They're excruciatingly fair.
Well, that's it. I was into being a Christian Scientist when I was like 20 years old.
The channel was very good, you know.
But they lost. They're in a lot of money trouble. They're having a terrible
They were only
time.
in money trouble because there's a 5-year projection, which they took from Ted Turner. You go into profit like CNN the 5th year. But Kay Fanning, who ran the paper, pulled the rug on them in the 3rd year. They would have been in profit. And on top of that, she's on the board of the Boston Globe, which meant she could sandbag them in the other paper, which now belongs to the Times.
Oh, that's another thing, that the same two people own everything. Look, I'm going to give the phone numbers. And after the news, you can have Mort Sahl.
You're going to have this guy.
No, I could talk to you believe me, for a whole other hour without letting anybody else. But this is interactive here. Belle, I've got him here. This is Belle who tried to pick you up.
I remember.
Well, here she is.
Hi, Mort.
Hi, Belle. How you doing?
I'm doing fine, Mort.
Good.
You're going to be doing fine, too, because if you believe in astrology, as of May 10th, everything's coming in great.
Tell me, what's happening?
You don't really want to hear about, Venus and...
May 11th being my birthday.
See, May 10th, it's all coming in.
It is?
Yeah, I'm serious.
I can't believe it.
We've had 2 bad years.
Yeah, it's been very grim for a long time.
Tell me about it.
Oh.
Anyway, Freud is wrong. Freud is wrong, and Bogart is right. Because in America,
yes,
the stuff that dreams are made out of, baby, is the Maltese Falcon.
Well, you saw what they did to Dashiell Hammett. But Lillian stuck with him.
She sure did.
It's interesting, isn't it?
But if you remember, their relationship lasted because they didn't live together.
Well, yeah, isn't it fascinating that through that time of everybody keeling over and deferring to the fascists, only a woman told them off. Lillian Hellman told the committee off. Where were the men? Except for Arthur Miller.
Oh, well. Anyway, getting back to you were interested in something humorous about politics.
Yeah.
I heard you discussing Kissinger.
Yeah.
Well, there's a great story that when this current book was written on his life, that the researcher went to speak to his brother. And the boys had grown up in Germany together, but the brother spoke with no German accent whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And the researcher said, how is this possible? He said, well, I'm the Kissinger who listens.
Yeah. I saw the kid, by the way, his kid getting a suit at Dick Carroll's in Beverly Hills. He looks like the old man. He's got that genius hair. You know, that hair that keeps going?
That Einstein hair?
You know, you'll be interested in this, Bill, I think. I was in Kennedy's office, and Kissinger was waiting to see him. He went to see him, and he came out. He advised them to use nuclear weapons in Southeast Asia, and Kennedy came out and said to Kenny O'Donnell, are you the guy that let that nut in here? That turns out to be the Secretary of State. He was well-sponsored, and Rockefeller forgave all the debts when he died. His hero.
By the way, you always discuss liberals, how do you feel about radicals? That's how I got the name. I was called Belle Starr by Abby Hoffman in the 60s. And all I want to know is, we were against the war,
yes,
and we were in favor of sex. Where do we go wrong?
I think that they tried to divert everybody with drugs and sexuality, so that they would depoliticize the movement. The idea was, you go into a kind of anarchy. In other words, if I were the government, I would want Saturday Night Live in lieu of Real Dissent, because it's mindless.
Are you there?
Yes, I'm listening. I'm the Kissinger.
So the whole thing with the drugs and free love and all that stuff was to turn people sideways. I have no doubt that the movement was penetrated by any number of government people. By the way, I saw Jerry Rubin in L.A.
Yeah, he's very, he networks now with
corporate.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know Krasner, I know that...
yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And his book just came out, quite a success. The other thing is, just recently, you might have noticed in the paper that there was an article stating that we should be very frightened because the Russians now are planning a super plague, a biological weapon. And what I want to know is, what are they setting us up for? Because suddenly Yeltsin may be in trouble.
Yeah.
Is there some little reason why they're suddenly telling us about this terrible super plague, which the West has no antidote for?
So that they can keep, I assume, keep the budget going for the Pentagon.
Could it be also that Yeltsin is in trouble, and so we need some type of mysterious burnt Reichstag, or remember the Maine, in order for us to let the military go in?
I can only tell you that in the precincts of Nixon and many financiers, I was told that Yeltsin was handpicked 3 or 4 years ago. I was being told that. This wonderful man. You notice nobody laments Gorbachev, who was like a mensch. Super mensch.
He was. By the way, I want you to know that women, we really have achieved equality, Mort.
How do you know that?
Because in the 70s, it was, I am not a crook, and now it's the 90s, and it's, my wife is not a crook.
Very good. Do you want to leave your phone number in with Bill, and we'll give it to Mort?
Oh, I'm going to come to the show.
Oh, all right.
Great.
You'll
miss going down there.
jump in personally?
Well, I don't know. Do you allow people backstage?
Of course.
Saul?
Of course. It's great.
And ask for an autograph.
It's great to talk to a girl who isn't, her limits aren't film school. Boy. She's terrific.
The greatest thing I ever heard was on ABC, I heard Gene McCarthy reading a poem on your show.
Oh, and yeah.
I said, God, it's worth keeping the radio.
He was on my show at the Monitor twice, and he's marvelous. He said once when he was running for the Senate, I was with him up in Minnesota. And this guy from NBC said to him, "Can you face the fact that you don't have many followers?" And McCarthy said, "Jesus only had 12, and one of them turned out to be unreliable, and unfortunately was the treasurer, and I should have known when he kissed me on the cheek."
That's great. Bill, I have to move on.
For the presidency?
Pardon me?
And we didn't take him for the presidency.
No, and I'll tell you what else. When Clinton and Gore were on the train, they went through Culpeper, Virginia, and stopped where he lives, and they didn't go near him either, which is a measure of them.
Bill, I have to move on.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay, bye.
Great to talk to you.
Okay, she'll be at the show.
She's terrific.
She really is. I've met her in real life, actually. Uh-oh, John from Staten Island, you're on the air with Mort Sahl.
Yes, Lynn, Jerry Rubin is a culprit now because, as all left-wing hypocrites discover eventually, when the time for playing is over and it's time to earn a living, America isn't such a bad place after all. And one thing you'll learn the longer you listen to Lynn, Mort, is that when she says she's definitely sure about something, you know to think the opposite. Bill Clinton is definitely better than George Bush. Now, here we've had 2 Democratic presidents in the last 15 years or so, Jimmy Carter and Bill Clinton. What a duo. And when you said before that America is not the place it used to be, and the kids today don't know what it is to know the real America. They've never been in the Army and anything like that.
Yeah.
And Lynn said, we have to deal with America the way it is. This is the way it is, and we have to accept it. No, Lynn, the reason you like life in America today, the way it is because it's full of anarchy and irresponsibility.
Okay, you're diatribing. You're not talking, Jake. He's a regular. You know about the regular callers?
Well, I know. I appreciate how he feels.
I got rid of
He's
him.
outnumbered by New Yorkers. And
no, you need to hear some of the more racist rants from John of Staten Island.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
We know him. You don't see. He tries to sneak in on people that don't know him.
Uh-huh.
But I have his number. Hi, Jack. You're on the air with Mort Sahl.
Good evening, dear. How
Hi.
are you?
Okay.
Mr. Sahl.
I assume
Yes,
he was
sir.
saying dear to me, not you.
Yes. You're the hostess. Let's get serious, and I hope Bell is still listening. Forget about John from Staten Island. The guy makes me sick. I'd like to talk about three things. Henry Kissinger, real quick.
Yeah.
John Kennedy, and then Elvis Presley. The question you asked earlier in the program is why does it look like Anthony Lake is one of Henry Kissinger's proteges?
Yeah.
I'll tell you why.
Why?
Henry Kissinger, at the end of the Vietnam War in 1973, abandoned several thousand live American soldiers, pilots, rescue crews who were being held captive in Southeast Asia. He brought home, Henry Kissinger negotiated for the release of 593 men and abandoned the rest of them. And there always has to be a Henry Kissinger puppet in the White House to make sure that the truth never gets to the American people. But we're almost there. We're pushing the truth out every day. That's number one.
Okay.
Number two, I'm a former Marine who guarded John Kennedy, and I'm a retired New York City police officer.
Oh.
I was at the inaugural with John Kennedy. The guys that you missed, that you and the attorney Garrison missed, were G. Gordon Liddy and E. Howard Hunt. These guys are two swine, two traitors, two assassins, two psychopaths. Now about Elvis Presley.
And at least one talk show host.
Yeah, and guess what? He was on WJFK in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
Gordon Liddy has a talk show. In fact, he used to be on in this time slot.
I've challenged Mr. Liddy to invite me onto his program, and he hung up on me. But let me run this by you about Elvis, because I ran this by Lynn, and I don't know whether she did anything with it, but here we go. Mr. Sahl, are you familiar with a document called the Houston Plan?
Yes. From Watergate.
Yeah. I'm not trying to be a wise guy, but could you give me a brief description of what you think the Houston Plan was?
Well, it had to do with domestic surveillance, and Hoover objected to it, didn't he?
Yeah. It was, Dan Rather referred to it as a Gestapo.
Oh, really?
Right?
And you said he wasn't involved.
Well, that document is dated July 1970. Richard Nixon approved it in July 1970. The truth, that document never surfaced until after Watergate, because E. Howard Hunt had the Houston Plan in the safe, and he was telling people, if you don't take care of me, my family, and the rest of the burglars, I'm going to release the Houston Plan to the press. Well, it finally did come out. And the document is dated July 1970. But guess what? 6 months prior to that, 6 months after July 1970, on December 21st, 1970, the most recognized celebrity on the planet, a very decent man, a man who served his country in the United States Army, Elvis Presley, rang the doorbell at the White House and told the guard he liked Richard Nixon and he wanted to meet with him because he wanted to help him. I told Lynn, and the meeting did take place. I have in front of me some communications between Dwight Chapin, who was a convicted Watergate conspirator.
You need to wind this up.
And H.R. Haldeman.
Yeah.
Now, I told Lynn this, that you can quote me on this. If Mother Teresa had rang the doorbell at the White House 6 months after Richard Nixon had signed off on the Houston Plan, and if Mother Teresa had rang that doorbell as Elvis Presley did, Mother Teresa would not be here today either. What happened to Elvis Presley? There's a journalist in Georgia. Her name is Gail Brewer Giorgio, who has excellent credibility and integrity. She has investigated the circumstances surrounding the death of Elvis Presley. I have told her this. I've sent her to Houston.
Hurry up.
All right. I said to her, I've seen this before. It looks like Elvis Presley, in the parlance of the intelligence community, was spooked, was frightened, terrorized into seclusion.
Okay, thank you.
Incidentally, his line about we overlooked Howard Hunt, don't forget Mark Lane's book, your cousin's book, Plausible Denial, which doesn't overlook Howard Hunt.
Well, when G. Gordon Liddy was filling in for Bob Grant here, Every day I walked in and said, Gordon, who killed Kennedy?
And what did he say?
Lee Harvey Oswald.
Oh, yeah, well, there's an investment there.
And that's why he's still alive today. We have to take a break. Mort Sahl's here. We'll take more phone calls. See, now, you're learning something about this audience.
Yes.
My audience all has conspiracy theories.
Yeah, I see.
You don't engender a lot of humorous calls.
Yeah, I noticed that. Maybe we better go back and tell some stories.
Frank from Queens, who's a couple away, he knows as much about Kennedy's assassination probably as you do. So you're going to love Frank.
I worked with Elvis in Vegas, for years, yeah.
You knew Elvis?
Yeah, oh, very well. Good guy. I worked at the Hilton with him.
Oh, my God.
I was at the Hilton all year. I had a permanent job there.
I'm going to faint. We're going to take a break, and I'm going to find out if Mort ever went to the bathroom with Elvis and how long it was about Kennedy's
After
assassination.
this, I'm going to tell a health story.
Well,
okay, Frank, go.
Well, I appreciate that introduction, and I've always wanted to speak to you, Mort, because I know that you were personally involved with Jim Garrison.
Yes.
Now, I personally, first of all, I don't believe that Garrison ever really set out to solve the assassination, but I hold by the belief that basically Garrison had set out to deflect any legitimate and discredit, and he did much to discredit investigations with his claims that he made about neo-Nazis and continually how he...
He should have been paid better if he deflected such a large issue.
Well, he was paid.
He did? He had $4,500 in the bank when I left New Orleans.
Well, he was paid very well by Carlos Marcello.
Not true. He didn't even know him.
He didn't know him?
No.
I'm going to give you a quote.
And neither did I, and I was there 5 years.
Right. All right, let me give you this quote.
From what?
The quote is from his own book, On the Trail of the Assassins. Okay.
Which I'm in, by the way.
All right. Well, when the reporter came down from the New York Times and said, and he says...
The New York Times? Oh, well.
Wait. He says in the book... On page, you can look it up, 167.
Yeah, what does he say?
He said, the reporter said, do you know this individual who is the head of all of organized crime in New Orleans? And I looked at the name and I said, sir, if this man is the head of crime in New Orleans, then I'm the quarterback for Notre Dame. Now, he didn't want to mention Carlos Marcello. But you're going to tell me that Jim Garrison is going to say that that he didn't know about Carlos Marcello was like Rudy Giuliani had saying that he didn't know about John Gotti or Angelo Bruno, or that Elliot Ness had never heard of Al Capone. Carlos Marcello ran New Orleans.
How do you know that?
Excuse me?
How do you know that? I was in the DA's office. I had a badge, a gun, and an office, and I didn't know that.
I know it. Because he was brought before the Kefauver Commission, Carlos Marcello, in 1954 as a known head of organized crime in New Orleans.
You were watching the hearings then?
Excuse me?
You were watching the hearings then? In 54?
I've seen the films of the hearings. And you can pick up Farewell America, which was written in 1964. In 1964, James Hepburn's book, which was an alias, was written in Europe. It was never printed in America. I have the editions that was printed in England. That he mentions Carlos Marcello. It was well known that Carlos Marcello hated Bobby Kennedy for what Bobby Kennedy did. You know Harold Weisberg, who you must know, correct?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Do you know that I spoke to Harold Weisberg about Garrison? He told me that Garrison was so full of it, he left Garrison. He wrote a book, The Case for Conspiracy, about Oswald in New Orleans. The name is Oswald in New Orleans, The Case for CIA Conspiracy. He wrote it when he was with Garrison, when he was touting Garrison.
I was down there when he was with Garrison.
I know, Mort, I'm not attacking you.
Yeah.
I have great respect for you.
Whitewash 4.
Well, I have all the books.
Yeah.
The point I'm bringing out is he turned around and turned against Garrison. He said that he was manipulated by Garrison. Garrison never proved that Clay Shaw conspired. Garrison may have, he may have known Ferry. He may have known Oswald. He was involved with homosexuals within New Orleans. It doesn't mean that he went out that he conspired to kill him. They never proved it.
Wasn't Shaw a contract agent for the CIA?
He was a contract agent, but because he was a contract agent for the CIA, that doesn't mean that he was a high-level operative. Do you think in 1963 that the CIA was going to have a homosexual...
What about his relationship with Lee Harvey Oswald, who I hear did the killing? Don't forget the government said that. And by the way, the government... I don't want to be in the embarrassing position of agreeing with anything the government said, but... He was a friend of David Ferry, and he was a friend of Oswald's.
Yes, that's
Shaw.
Yeah.
But Shaw's not. What about the fact that Victor Marchetti, who was a deputy director of CIA, says that Richard Helms brought him into the office when he was director and said, we have to do everything to help Clay Shaw because Garrison's after him.
Yeah, because what they didn't want was to compromise any information that might have come out about the CIA.
How they did it.
They did not want, it was not that they were there to cover up a government role in the assassination. It was that any evidence that would have come out that might have been damaging to what the government was doing in secret at that time or had been doing, or Oswald...
May I add parenthetically that in this line of saving America's honor, like Johnson charged Warren with doing, we're now at a point where nobody I know believes anything the government says. I don't think they did too good a job. How do you know that Garrison is to be discredited? Where'd you get that?
Where did I get it?
Yeah.
First, I read from the conversations I had with Harold Weisberg. I have a tape that was produced...
But you can find critics that will discredit Weisberg. They're very factional.
But you haven't told me one thing that Garrison did that ever proved that Clay Shaw was involved in the assassination, and he never proved that the CIA was. He was covering up for Carlos Marcello, who was behind the assassination, who the facts confirm was behind the assassination.
Okay.
And one last thing about Mark Lane. Mark Lane is a liar. Mark Lane plays fast and loose with the facts, and Mark Lane has more done to discredit true investigation than anyone has.
Who has a true investigation?
I'm so nervous.
Don't be nervous.
What's his name, Lynn? I mentioned I got his book right here. The guy that wrote who wrote Mafia Kingfisher, John H. Davis.
John H. Davis is not to be discredited?
No.
Why?
Because John H. Davis documents conversations. He does documentation of the involvement of Carlos Marcello in the murder and assassination.
Let me ask you one question, and I'm going to go. Who had the body after the president died? Who had the body?